Okay.
We didn't get to last month.
No.
And I don't think we went to that's okay.
No, no. Yeah.
Expect to see you for a long time to come.
Okay.
Alan, how are you?
We have a reason to be.
That's good. That's good.
Hello, Mayor. It's good to see you.
You see, and if you get people that,
Were they here in Oregon or?
because I gotta admit,
Yeah.
well, whichever side you're on, I see close-mindedness everywhere.
Yeah, I know.
We, at the mayor's 101 the other day at Market Choice.
We're done.
My house on Brooklyn. We had some lady come.
With a bigger family.
Yes, it
Her
is.
mom. You know, Gary, I love talking about
meeting in buildings that have my name on a brass plaque.
What's that?
I love meeting in buildings that have my name on a brass plaque out front.
Oh.
I looked at that and I looked at the names on that plaque and I realized how old I am. I'm the only active member.
How long you been active?
Oh my gosh.
Well, right.
Sorry that you weren't doing that. We got different kinds of pictures.
You're talking about the young woman that
Yeah.
was with farm issues?
But seriously, that's the kind of stuff that we, well,
See how it goes.
Yeah, they're.
Great sort of plastic.
Did League of Oregon Cities join you in your?
but is that,
I'm at this brief. You know, I think that's still up in the air, although
know
it's
there was
due
a
very
meeting on
quickly.
it. I saw a notice.
Oh, yeah.
No longer on the committee.
People. Right on.
Yeah, it's been a frustrating process. We just decided to go big, or, you know, I've been saying go big or no homes because the situation with the exceptions last year, the major issues, this little spin thing that goes almost a mile up one road, and it's just not buildable, and so it doesn't fit our So we need to figure out something else, but we thought we'd just take it to the end, so I'm not sure.
John, how are you?
I thought I'd bring it to your attention.
Hey,
Saw a couple emails this morning. It would be nice. Collaboration.
I don't think so, but how are you?
I'm trying. It's funny. I'm trying.
Good stuff. Hey, I was sure you weren't going to be here. You don't want me here? I thought you weren't going to be here.
Oh, John?
Hey, I just got that as my marching orders to leave.
Right. You're not supposed to be here. You said Reed Dunbar.
Land Watch Lane County
Rob
also
Interfeld said
filed
Reed Dunbar was going to be here.
an appeal to the Court of Appeals, which complicates things quite a bit.
Oh, right.
But
So I have what? Three of these left. Three of these meetings.
Are you in that counting down mode?
So Gary, so I
132 days.
Flyer
Letting people know early that I wasn't going to run again,
fixes their events.
and doing this kind of counting down.
No, but they're
Get ready
exempt.
for the change.
MPC meeting for September 1st, 2016. I'll start off by welcome introductions. Welcome to everybody who came to the meeting. And start off with introductions. I'm Alan Zelenka, City of Eugene, and I'm the chair.
Pat Farr, Board of County Commissioners, and I'd like to thank whoever was responsible for using tap water as our main liquid today. Thank you very much.
Yeah, he noticed.
Lake and Lake County Board of Commissioners.
I'm Becky Taylor with Lane County. I'm sitting in for Steve Mokraheisky and wanted to point out in the audience is our new Public Works Director, Tim Elsey, and I'll have him introduce himself.
Christine Lundberg, Mayor of Springfield.
Gino Grimaldi with the City of Springfield.
Petra Sheets, City of Coburg.
Brenda Wilson, Lane Council of Governments.
Brittany Brindle, ODOT.
Aurora Jackson, Lane Transit District.
Gary Wildish, Lane Transit District Board.
The other Gary from Lane Transit District Board. And normally it's my my obligation, right, or privilege to welcome you not only to my district, but to my place of employment. But as of a week from tomorrow, this will no longer be my place of employment as I'm retiring.
Oh my God.
Ooh, congratulations. That's great.
Lynn Taylor, minutes recorder.
John Reese for the City of Eugene.
Kitty Piercy, Mayor of Eugene.
For 132
32
more days.
Ooh, short timer.
Right. She actually knows the hour, so. All right, let's go ahead and start with, and do introductions of the audience.
Kelly Hale, Lane Transit District.
Chad Hawk and Board of Directors of Best here observing today.
Tom Boyett, City of Springfield.
Liz Butterfield, City of Springfield.
Edward McLeod, Lane Transit District.
Reed Dunbar, City of Eugene.
And I'm Tim Elsey, with Lane County.
And Kelly Clark with the Lane Council of Governments.
Paul Thompson with the Lane Council of Governments. Jeff Kernan, City of Coburg.
Michelle O'Leary, River Road.
All right. All right. With that, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes for August 4th meeting.
So moved. So moved.
Is there a second?
Good.
Are there any additions, corrections, or deletions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously, including an extra vote from Pat's phone. Any adjustments to the agenda, Brenda? No?
Nope.
Any announcements?
Just good time.
Oh, Public Works Director.
Yep, Tim.
Tim, do you want to speak
Is this
about where you
okay?
come from? And
Yeah, yeah. Tim, come up and introduce yourself.
Unexpected, but I appreciate the opportunity. I am Tim Elsey. I've been in public service for almost 20 years. I'm in public service because it is the most rewarding career that I've been able to find. It's been my privilege to be able to build partnerships and coalitions throughout my career so that we can solve problems for the community that I live in and that I serve. One of the things that I love about public service is that we get judged on how well we do the right thing every day. I'm very happy to be here in Lane County. I was incredibly impressed by the recruitment process. It was the most robust interview process that I've ever been a part of, but I've also been very gratified in going out and meeting the employees, the commissioners, certainly Steve, Becky, because of their commitment to public service, and I'm really, really happy to be here.
Wow, good interview speech. No wonder you were hired. Where did you come from?
I'm recently from Lewis County, Washington. I've been the Public Works Director and County Engineer there for 6 years. Prior to that, I was the County Engineer and Assistant Public Works Director in Missoula County, Montana.
Oh, another Montana. Oh, my God. Okay, thanks. Thanks,
Welcome.
Tim.
If
Welcome.
I may add, Tim went through a very robust interview process and also was up against some very highly qualified and competent competition for the position. Any one of you all could have been hired, but Tim rose to the top. Welcome once again to Lane County, to Eugene, and to into the MPC. Look forward to working with you, Tim.
Thank you very much.
Welcome. Any other announcements from any other committee members? No. With that, we'll move on into the comments from the audience. Do we have anybody signed up?
No one signed
No
up.
one signed up. Did anybody from the audience wish to make any comments? Okay. With that, we'll move on to the MPC issues. 6A, amendment to MTIP, Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program, and on schedule is the resolution 2016-07, amending the program, MTIP program for STIP funds for the Maine McVeigh Transit Study. Paul?
Good morning, thank you. This is the request for action on the item that we brought you last month for the public hearing and discussion to program additional MPO discretionary funds for the outreach project for the Maine McVeigh Transit Study. I don't have a lot to say in the staff report because the proposal and the request for funding remains the same. You did have a public hearing last month and one person from Better Eugene Springfield Transit testified, and subsequent to that, Better Eugene Springfield Transit did submit a letter of testimony which is in your packet. As I noted in my cover memo, that came after your staff committee met to recommend this funding, so they weren't able to consider the points raised in that letter. I did take a look at it, and the majority of the points raised in the letter are around the Maine McVeigh Transit Study itself, not around its eligibility for funding or the use of this funding for the project. So I don't have a lot to offer in response to the best letter. However, that's up to you to discuss. Again, we are asking for you to approve Resolution 2016-07 to program the funds.
So yeah, we did get numerous comments on this, one of which was from Congressman DeFazio, who expressed several concerns, and then another one more detailed, several concerns from, or issues to be brought up from Better Eugene Springfield Transit. I'm wondering if the LTD people or City of Springfield people could address some of those issues and how they're going to get. They're not they don't necessarily pertain to the outreach, particularly one of them does, but most of them. Tom?
So, Chair Zelenka, members of MPC, Tom Boyott with the City of Springfield. Would it be your preference that I go through the letter point by point, or do you have specific issues that you'd like me to focus on?
If you could address the issues that they brought up.
All right. Clarifying primary purpose. At this point, you know, the way we approach projects is not single purpose specific. We live in a modern age where the modes are mixing within the right of way, where the impacts of how we develop and deliver modal improvements affect each other among the modes. They interact with abutting land use. You could make an improvement in one mode, which could have a safety impact in a different mode. I think it's for that reason that the governance team, the multi-jurisdictional project governance team, as well as the LTD board and the Springfield City Council have not picked at this point a specific purpose for the project, but we're rather looking at it more broadly in terms of all of the things that are going on inside the right-of-way, from transit to freight mobility to walking and biking, mobility and safety to water quality, and to the influence that the project will have on abutting land uses. So that's our response to number one. Number two, extend the project area. That was a mistake in the application. The project does go to LCC. Eliminate roundabout design concepts. I'm a little bit puzzled by this one. I'm not sure why there would be a suggestion to eliminate a particular intersection form before it had been studied thoroughly for its improvements to safety, its improvements to mobility, its improvements to air quality, and quite possibly its smaller right-of-way footprint than an expanded intersection with a Q-jump lane. So it's confusing to me. I don't really understand it. And I think at this point I just point out that the Congressman DeFazio's letter was not submitted to the MPO. It was submitted to Lane Transit District and attached as part of the best comment letter to you. Public participation.
Just a general question about roundabouts, and I like roundabouts, and I think Eugene should have more of them. But what about the pedestrian and bicycle issues, safety around them? Have you seen any difference in them as opposed to other intersections? Some people think they're complicated, other people think they're great.
Right. So they improve bicycle and pedestrian safety, but it's a different intersection form that takes a while to get used to. Cyclists can cycle through the roundabout as a vehicle because in Oregon, a bicycle can act as a vehicle within a lane on a roadway, or they can use the bypass, hop off the bike, press the stutter flash, take the crossing the way a pedestrian would. Across the country, the data clearly suggests that roundabouts are a lot safer for bikes and pedestrians, and that's primarily because they're only ever crossing one direction of travel. It's one direction of travel that allows you to go in multiple directions. So we have, if the MPC would like, we could come to MPC and make a roundabout presentation, or not. Your choice. We could also come back. The project leads for Maine McVeigh Transit Study there. Both the LTD and the city project lead are at the Springfield City Club today presenting. Otherwise, somebody else would be sitting here in front of you. But they could come to this group as well and present on the project if you like. And I'm not quite through the numbering yet, but.
Okay.
Is it on this topic?
Yeah, on the pedestrian.
Yeah. Oh, well, we'll see if there's an overwhelming clamoring for a presentation at the end.
Okay.
Mayor Piercy and then Franny.
I was just going to say, I think as we built roundabouts and watched how they play out, we've learned a lot along the way and made everybody's had that happen, and you make improvements in how they work because you learn from that experience. And so I have a lot more confidence in them after having worked through some of those things where they weren't working smoothly at the beginning, but I think that's what you have to do. So,
and you raise a good point, and it reminds me that a roundabout is not a given at every intersection. It's sort of context specific, and you have to look at what's going on with the different types of vehicles that are using the intersection, the volumes, the demand, its physical location, abutting land uses. I think our point is that it makes good public policy sense to look at a roundabout side by side with the intersection form and base it a decision, a choice on that information rather than jumping the gun. So.
The other thing I wanted to say is that, my opinion, but I think when we are looking at something, sometimes you're asked to make a choice between it, like better transit or safer streets? And I would think we would want both, and we would want them both to be very, very good. And so I don't think we choose one over the other. I would think for all of our projects, those would be things that we would be trying to think about at the same time.
Yes, thank you for that. And, sometimes you can make a transit improvement and create a safety problem if you're not paying attention to the rest of the environment. And sometimes you can make a safety improvement that has an impact on transit operations. So it's just super important to keep those together in the analysis and to bring all that information forward.
My final comment is I think it's important for people to, in letters like this, to raise issues because we think that just makes us think about them. That's not a matter of agreeing or disagreeing. It's just asking you to think about it more, and I think that can add to the work that we all do. So I appreciate it. I don't think it necessarily calls for you to have to make a thumbs up or thumbs down on anything. I just think it's okay, think about these things and make sure we're paying attention to them, and so I appreciate it from that perspective.
Absolutely, and you can never really discount where great ideas are going to come from. And a good proportion of the time they come from the public. Because they're just having a different angle of approach, a different view. So we stay as open as we can to all the feedback and input.
Franny?
Yes, I just wanted to say that the roundabout design that has been forwarded for construction for the Maine McVeigh has been through a thorough vetting. Maine Franklin project. Has been through some traffic analysis from the engineers, and we are much more adaptable to roundabouts than we've used to been as an agency. We've seen the safety, we've seen them work well in the Bend area. We've seen them, and so it's taken a while for Region 2 to get on board, but even the Region 2 traffic safety planners and engineers are really liking the roundabout. And then we have, from the multimodal perspective, and ADA, our bicycle and pedestrian engineers have also looked at the roundabout and made suggestions on how to make them safe for all modes. So, yeah.
Carry on?
Carry on.
So the number 4 is inclusive public participation, and I don't know if Kelly Hale has enough of these to hand out today. I don't. Okay, well, we can get you this list, but it's a pretty comprehensive list of all of the public outreach in the corridor. I think the concern is that while it's been valuable and will continue to be exceedingly useful to work hand in glove with the fronting property owners and business owners, I think the question is, where's the voice of the rest of the community? And we've got a significant list of activities that have already occurred in what we call our communications plan, as well as planned activities from tabling at events, multiple presentations like the one I mentioned today, postcard mailings to over 12,000 folks within a buffer of the corridor, and those kinds of things, project website, interested parties list. We've been on the front page of the Register Guard a couple of times. So, I think it's, I feel like this project is doing a good job communicating to the public, and we just happen to be in the very intensive business fronting the corridor outreach stage, but plan to do a lot more in the community. That was number 4, and number 5, revised project process timeline. That's a great idea, and we're working on it. So,
any comments on Congressman DeFazio's letter? There.
Thank you, Tom. This project was never just a transit corridor study. We have significant safety issues. So it's always been a safety corridor, but we also had a visioning process, what we want to see for that corridor in the future, because there's plenty of redevelopment, et cetera. And it's a major freight and transportation corridor. It's a good 7 miles long. You have multiple uses, so we have attacked it from the perspective. You have to look at it as a corridor that has a lot of moving parts, including one of the heaviest used transit corridors out there. And we want to make that an even better corridor and make it a beautiful corridor and have bikes and pedestrians. So it is multifaceted, so it isn't as clean a cut as if you were just doing a transit study. So with that in mind, we want to be able to move it all kind of forward, because one of the worst things that happens is when government goes in there and then all of a sudden a different government is talking about medians or whatever, because we have this arts grant now too. So rather than do it independently, is try to coordinate them so that the public looks like the left hand knows what the right hand is doing. And the outcome should be a much better corridor, and one that businesses and residents and visitors, because people come in over the Cascades, that's the first thing they see is that corridor. So how to do that in a very good way. And that reduction of speed, I've already been contacted that people love the reduction in speed. So those are all factors that I think influence that it can look a little messier than it actually is, that it is on a good track when it comes to the roundabouts. I personally walk the roundabouts, and I know that they can be a little scary if you don't know what you're doing. And I think it's going to take time for people to get used to them, because we're not the high metro area where cars are used to having people out in the intersections and everybody's trying to negotiate politely, that it doesn't necessarily work that way well yet. So I'm very conscious of the roundabouts and where we put them and how they work to make sure that people feel safe, because the one on Hayden Bridge or Harlow Road is the one I walk in. There's a lot of cars going in a lot of directions at that one, so you have to be good at how you're doing it. So I think we'll have a great project. The idea is not to have it drug out, but have robust public, and this funding will give us opportunity to continue that conversation with the whole community and the impacted folks along the Main Street corridor, so that we come out with a project that everyone can live with and will benefit everyone. So we're in a much better spot with those that have been coming out, and I'm sure that will continue to be how we go forward, and we'll have something we can be proud of at the end of it. And Peter, I had a conference call with Peter over the Maine McVeigh issues, and he was, I think you said it, yeah, that he was okay with where we're at when we finish that conversation.
Good. Okay. Good.
So this question is to Franny. So just a little clarifying. So are you saying that ODOT is comfortable moving forward on the potential roundabouts? Because this is a state system.
Right. Yes, we are much more open to roundabouts at intersections than we have in the past, because we've seen that they operationally work well and that they can be designed for multimodal. We still have to go through all the process of motor carrier, making sure that we have to do the modeling and the tracking and make sure the truck can make it through and the bus can make it through. If the bus can make it through, usually the truck can make it through. But yeah, given all those things, yes. Yeah. And the other big thing is ODOT requires that with motor carrier, and because it is because freight uses the facility, that there's the outreach component includes freight in those discussions. So we just have to make sure that the process includes them.
And Association of Oregon Counties Conference this last year, we had a presentation he was from ODOT, and he talked about two roundabouts, one in Washington County and one in Clackamas County, that were on state systems, and that they've been very successful there. And but with this being a freight route, that I'm glad you brought that forward as well, that there's a bit of a process you'll have to go through, and I think we understand that. But I just wanted to make sure that from ODOT's perspective, that ODOT is comfortable. Yeah. Good, perfect.
Yeah, years ago, the director put out a letter because there was concern from the freight committee, the OTA, I think it was OFA, I can't remember, the association.
OTA.
Yeah, OTA. And he put a kind of a slow down, I'm not sure about this whole roundabout. And, you know, we have to study it a bit, and so we have. We've, you know, piloted it, studied it, and then since that has been rescinded. Yeah, we just have to make sure that the locals work with, and then we're comfortable.
Thank you. Thank you. Just add something about roundabout. I love roundabouts. We have one at the end of Barger, at the eastern end of, western end of Barger Drive and at the western end of Roosevelt. They're intersections as opposed to cross. And they work great, other than people quite often don't know how to use them. I think a greater outreach as far as showing people how to use it. You know, yield left, turn right. Just the exact opposite of England, which is yield right, turn left. And if you've ever been on the M1 between London and Sheffield, you know that at very high speeds, roundabouts work very, very well. So as long as people know how to use them, they're fantastic.
Chevy Chase had a challenge.
He did, but you know, it's a nice day that he spent on picking
Gives
those
me the
circles.
opportunity to plug our how to use a roundabout videos, along with how to use a stutter flash crossing, how to use a hyper pedestrian beacon. We have those videos accessible through the front page of the Springfield website, and we got a small grant, and we produced videos. You might recognize some of the pedestrians and cyclists using the crosswalks in those videos, but real.
You know,
real
signage
well-received.
may be helpful too. Just a very simple instruction. You know, when I first got to England a few years ago, my cousin said, "We're going to be going fast. Follow me. Yield right, turn left." Okay, and that's all he told me about roundabouts, and that's all you really need to know is how to yield and where to turn. So you know, as you go to a roundabout, if there's a sign that said "yield left, turn right," you know, then that gets. You see a lot of particularly big truck drivers who don't yield any direction. When I say big, I mean big pickups, you know, who drive over the roundabout, and so it's,
I want to go there.
it can be an adventure.
Right. Yeah, I think that's especially, it's particularly true of almost every time we do something new, whether it's the stutter lights or backing in on 13th parking or roundabouts or the bicycle track. People just have to get some time to get used to this stuff, and eventually they figure it out because everybody's pretty smart about it.
Maybe a whole generation before it's figured out.
Yeah, well, there's always
We hope not.
holdouts. All right, thanks, Tom. Thanks, Mayor. Any other comments and questions on that, Gary?
I really appreciate the hard work the city of Springfield is doing, along with some LTD staff, to do more outreach, because as they've gotten into this, they find that it's important, and I think it'll be well worth it. And I really appreciate Beth's letter, second year comments, because we need that kind of input. So.
With that, I'll entertain a motion for approval of Resolution 2016-07.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Carries unanimously. On to item 6B. Skip enhanced non-highway funding priorities. This was an issue that we talked about last time, and it's the prioritization of the local projects, and and we have an alternative proposal in there as well. So, Paul, you want?
Yes, thank you. So back in November of 2015, MPC looked at all of the applications for the current round of ODOT's STIP non-highway enhanced funding program and recommended to the Lane Act the priorities for the MPO projects, and as our procedure goes, the Lane Act then recommended a 150% priority list out of all of the county-wide applications. That process resulted in what is called a Super Act meeting. That is the meeting of the 4 acts within ODOT Region 2, to recommend a Region 2 level 150% priority list. The reason for the 150% step is so that you can narrow down the number of applications before ODOT takes on what is called the scoping of the projects. Scoping looks at the projects in detail, for eligibility, for technical issues, and for cost estimation. Shortly after your August MPC meeting, what's included in your packet as attachment 1 was released, and that was the result of the scoping efforts. It's this table, the black and white table. And you will notice something that we don't typically see in scoping, where a number of the cost estimates were reduced from the original application. It was interesting for us to see that, and it's not unheard of, but it's very rare. There also were some cost increases. The next step, once the projects are scoped and what's called then the scoped estimates are available, is for the acts to go back and determine whether the priorities have changed at all, determine whether there's anything else that needs to be adjusted before there's a final Super Act meeting, which is a week from tomorrow, September 9th, where again the areas in Region 2 will get together and decide what to recommend to the Oregon Transportation Commission for 100% funding. So they will, in essence, be whittling that 150% list down to 100%, down to the 10.6 million that's available in Region 2. The process is going to kick off with the second attachment that came out last week from ODOT staff, which is what they're calling the straw proposal to start the discussion. This lists, again, all of the projects, all the applications in Region 2 by area, and highlights in green what the straw proposal proposes to be a starting point for discussion to use the 10.6 million that is available. Just quickly looking at this, the good news, if you go down to the last box in Area 5, our area, is that the straw proposal recommends funding 3 projects within Lane County: City of Anita, City of Eugene, and the City of Florence projects. However, one of the things that we would like to talk with you today about is perhaps a strategy for Commissioner Lycan as the ACT chair at the Super ACT meeting next Friday to look at advocating for funding of our 4th priority, the City of Springfield Filling the Gaps project. So I outlined in my memo some points, and I'm going to pass around a handout here for why we think there is a case to be made. And if anybody wants to, I don't have enough back there, but if anybody wants to, this handout outlines why we think there's a case to be made for funding the City of Springfield Filling the Gaps project instead of the Area 3 Yamhill County Transit project. So if you look at Area 3, that's their 5th priority. Some of this is in your memo. Basically, the bottom half of this page talks to points to consider when recommending what we're calling the last Region 2 project to fund. In other words, the way this straw proposal appears to have been put together is to recommend funding the top priorities out of all 4 areas, which got you to about 10 million, 10.1 million, and then they had to find that last project that would take up that last $400,000 to $500,000 of funding. Well, if you look at Area 3's proposals, their 3rd and 4th priority were too big an ask, 800,000 and 1.2 million. So it jumped down to their 5th priority, the Yamhill County project, becoming sort of that last project recommended for funding. We're really not quite sure why that one was picked as opposed to the City of Springfield one, which is another $400,000 project, except you may consider that that would fund 3 projects in those 2 areas. In Area 3, the Salem-Keizer area, and our area are the areas within the region that have the larger populations and that have the MPOs. But while it resulted in, at least on the face of it, equity in the number of projects funded, it's not equitable in the amount of funding. And again, that's in my cover memo and in this handout at the top, where it shows that the straw proposal would direct 34% of the region's funding to Area 3 and only 25% to this area. And we believe that funding equity is a much more reasonable measure than the number of projects. So going down the points on the lower half of the page that I just passed around real quick, as I said, Areas 3 and 5 are similar with respect to transportation. Area 3's 150% list here is almost double that of Area 5's. They're requesting 6.5 million in funding overall. We're requesting 3.5 million. The straw proposal recommends funding, again, Area 3 at 34% of the region funding and us at 25%, which is fully 33% more for Area 3 than for us. Funding for that Area 3 Yamhill County project is funding only a portion of it. If you notice on the Area 3 project, they're requesting $1.4 million. This is not funding their full request, it's funding $400,000. They scaled back minimum portion that they could live with, from what I've learned. The Area 3 project also would only provide 10.27% match. That Yamhill County project meets the minimum match requirement, where the city of Springfield is providing 33% match. So it's much better leveraging of the state dollars. Funding for the Area 3 project would essentially, that $400,000 would essentially buy one bus replacement. Now, that's not a bad thing, but it would only buy one bus replacement, and it wouldn't ensure any new service. It would just continue the existing service, which would not go away if this did not happen, but it would continue it with a newer bus. Funding the Springfield project would actually provide new service. It would provide new sidewalks. It would provide new safety enhancements for Springfield. It would provide new connections to transit. So it would increase the amount of service as opposed to just maintaining the existing service in Yamhill. And then the last part on, the last bullet on this handout, I want to talk to a little bit more extensively, which is that for the first time, the Oregon Transportation Commission has directed $15 million of STIP funding into a new program for bus replacements specifically. They've never had a dedicated pot out of the STIP. This time they do. There's $5 million rolling out this fiscal year and $5 million each of the next 2 fiscal years. The first round this fiscal year is set to, I believe, go out for solicitations next month or within the next month or 2. It would be dedicated to exactly what the Yamhill County project is looking to do. I've spoken with ODOT staff about this, and they verified that yes, the Yamhill County project would be eligible for this funding. And as I noted in that last paragraph, this is one of those situations that we've seen many times where it makes sense to advocate for taking a project out of the flexible pot and funding it out of something that's dedicated to that purpose and leaving the flexible funds for projects that don't have other sources. So all of those points summarized is the case, I guess, we're making for you to discuss for giving Commissioner Lykin some input next week when he goes to the Super Act meeting to advocate for the Springfield project over the Yamhill project.
I may be sick that day.
You got 6 bullets. Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I think these are very good, well written, Paul, and good rationale for the case. Mayor?
So just my sense of things is, and I remember we had these conversations before where we found a remedy that allowed everybody to get what they needed, and this is aiming in that direction. And I just think that's the most powerful tool you have here. The other part, I think, is a sort of in our mind, equity issues, but those have a harder journey in the discussion. But I think this thing about how we use our dollars to get the most for everybody is a really strong case in here, and I think it appeals to the broader body that has to make those decisions, because it isn't just one jurisdiction against the other, but trying to have everybody come out well.
Mayor Lindberg?
Well, number one, it's a project, it's a Springfield project, but aside from that, I agree that really what we're looking for is the best projects for the entire region. And if you put it in that perspective, what's the most bang for your buck, but what does the most good? So in my mind, it wouldn't be even a question. But if you can make it safer for children or safer for anyone to have better connectivity, which is one of my fondest words is connectivity, is let's push for something like that. And if there's another form of funding that's about to be released that will do exactly the same thing as the other project, then it makes sense to advocate for a project that would do more good for the whole in the long run.
Good.
So Paul, question. I've not heard from Veneta at all on this.
Yes.
Have you heard from Veneta?
Yes.
Because this is about a 45% increase on the scoping. And, first of all, why? I mean, it would be a good question to know, and I would agree with Mayor Lundberg. I mean, when you're looking for your biggest bang for the buck, Springfield project clearly is the biggest bang for your buck. And during the act, we were trying to be respectful going with rural, urban, so on and so forth. I have no, Florence remains consistent, no problem there. But all of a sudden, Veneta jumps 45% on the scoping. And as you know, Lane County, thanks to Franny and myself, we put a lot of heat on some folks up in Salem on the territorial highway. We got that completely off the step and put it in a step leverage, so that's moving forward. So there's been sacrifices made there. So what's Veneta thinking here? Because as Kitty knows, you're going to be walking into the Super Act with veteran political folks. They are not novice people at all. They've been around this thing for a while. They're politically very savvy, but they also care about their home and their particular acts. And so the question I have then with regards to Veneta, frankly, are they prepared to, because I don't know, are we going to have to sacrifice Veneta? That's my question on this, to make sure that those other projects that have a bigger, that you're going to get so much more back for such a lower cost, are we going to have to sacrifice Veneta? I don't want to, but I got to tell you, when you jump up 45%, if it's 10 or 20%, that's one thing, but 45% is a big, big number. Have you heard from Veneta on this? Are they prepared to, what are they prepared to do? I guess that's the question I have, because when you walk into that Super Act, you want to be armed with as much information as possible to make sure that you all come out with the Region 2 feeling like, okay, we've got some good projects in here. So that's my question to you, is where's Veneta on this?
So Commissioner Lycan, at the August ACT meeting, you weren't able to be present, and George Greer chaired the meeting, and at the ACT meeting, this table was available. They saw the cost increase. So they did have some discussion around the Veneta project and indeed the rest of the project's scoping changes. They did not have this available, so that's why I focused on that today.
Sure.
At the ACT meeting, there was definitely concern about the increase in the City of Veneta project and direct questioning, not only at the meeting but prior to the meeting, of Veneta of whether they could accept not only the increase in the match requirement from 90,000 to 161,000, but, you know, when project scopes increase this much, there's the risk that they could increase even more. And Veneta certified, or, you know, stated that they would assume not only the higher match requirement, but the cost estimates as they were. They understood what had happened. Without going into too many of the details, and Bill Johnson might be better suited to do that than I, but the scoping report for the project mainly increased costs because of environmental concerns. You know, there's wetlands and marshes there, right-of-way issues,
Soil conditions.
So a lot of things that to be frank, in the scoping process, the ODOT staff are perhaps more skilled and more experienced at scoping than when the local jurisdiction put together the original cost estimate. But yes, Commissioner, Veneta committed to the higher match requirement and accepted the higher scoping cost outcome. And then the act as a whole, basically, I guess I can summarize it because I think this was the phrase used at the ACT meeting a couple of weeks ago. The act as a whole said, this doesn't change our view of the priorities for the 5 Lane County projects. Yes, this one went up significantly and some of the others went down and Florence stayed the same, but it doesn't change our ranking or priorities. So that was the direction from the act.
Well, we have an ACT meeting before the Super ACT meeting.
No, the Super ACT meeting is a week from tomorrow. So that's why there's not
Oh, we
another.
do, that's right, you're right, okay. Okay.
So this is
the opportunity.
I would like to hear, but I'd personally like to hear from Veneta. Maybe I'll just reach out to Rick and go out and visit with them and figure out, because I got to tell you, I find that this is going to be a really, really tough sale. It's going to be tough to sell this. And knowing the fact that you have a project that went down after the scoping, that the leverage of this, and I'm not saying this because I live in Springfield. I'm looking at specifically the numbers. And because it went down, it's gonna be, that would be the easiest sell that there is. I mean, are you kidding me? I mean, if somebody didn't accept that one, I'd look at them and say, we need to go outside or something, I mean, come on. But the Veneta one, I'm gonna tell you right now, will be a very, very tough sell. And as you know, I just finished with the Connect. Frankly, sometimes it doesn't matter what the local priorities are. A super act can walk in and say, you know what, I don't know, Sid. I don't think we're prepared for Veneta. So the question I also have is Veneta prepared to say, okay, with this new information that comes from ODOT, does it increase the timing of the project? Is the project going to take longer? So from that perspective, can this come back next year? Those are some questions that I'm going to have. But that's questions that'll be raised to us, by the way, when we're there at the Super Act meeting is, well, are you prepared to cut this one and fund your other ones? Well, no, the Act is telling me this is our top priority, so, gee, if this is the only one we get, sorry. That's my thought.
I would suspect it would be good for Rick to address those issues before you go to the meeting.
He's gonna have to.
On the issue of reduction in funding,
Gonna have to.
on the Eugene one in particular, that is actually somewhat in dispute. The city of Eugene folks don't agree with the ODOT estimate in that they've got lower unit prices than any that Eugene has seen and some other issues with that. And so that's more of an issue between ODOT and Eugene, but I wanted to put that one out there as well.
I can provide a little bit more on that for a moment real quick. It is a case where in the ones that were reduced in cost after the scoping, specifically the Eugene Roosevelt Path and the City of Springfield Fill in the Gas projects were both surprised by the reduction in the cost estimate. And as Councilor Zelinka said, Eugene is not certain that ODOT's unit cost estimates for materials and other things are appropriate because they're seeing higher costs. What ODOT has said is that the scoping cost estimates will be the starting point for next week's meeting because that's the uniform playing field against which all projects were evaluated in the region. But if a jurisdiction at the meeting next week wants to advocate that no, this isn't really, in the case of the Roosevelt project, isn't really going to cost $571,000, it's going to cost the $781,000 because we know our costs better, that can be raised at the table next week. My understanding from talking with Eugene's staff is that they're still considering whether to have that point raised next week, and will be trying to work with me and Commissioner Lycan if needed. They're still trying to understand the costs better.
Yeah, this is a big chunk of money. Mayor Lundberg? Something to add to that?
Oh, okay.
No,
No, I'll come back.
Gary?
Just a comment on the Fill the Gaps project. I was at the Lane Act meeting when that was presented to us, and the arguments were so compelling and overwhelming that it got very, very strong support from the Act. So I'm surprised that it's in jeopardy here because it is such a good project.
Gary and then Franny?
Paul, the Area 3 and the Area 5, how do they match in terms of population? I'm looking at the equity issue, and I'm wondering do you have anything like that? Because I was looking here and seeing if you dropped one by 400,000 and added 400,000 to the other, all of a sudden they become pretty close to the same.
Right.
And I didn't know whether that would provide Mr. Lycan any information or any support for a position.
It would, if you swap those two, Area 3 would receive approximately 31% of, I think it was 31 or 30%, and
30.
we would receive
39.
And we would receive 29% of the funding in Area 5. Honestly, I would have to look, and I can provide that before next Friday, at the population of the area.
Give me some ammunition.
I know that, did you know the answer to that, Bill?
Yes, Area 3 is actually a larger population. I'm sorry, it's the Salem area, Area 3, versus Area 5 here. There's also more, I believe, more road miles, more culverts, more bridges. It's actually more urbanized up there than it is down here. We talk about that informally at ODOT from time to time. How do the areas compare? That's actually a more intensely developed area than down here.
We're the only one county area, if you will, which means we only really have the one metropolitan center.
Thank you.
Right.
So, in response to what Paul has brought up as good reasoning for advocating to move money from the Yamhill bus to this area for the Springfield, I think it's a very good one. It's true that there are other funds that can be used. And I just wanted to remind the commission that this straw proposal is just basically not even heavily, we're not defending ourselves at all. This was just a starting place for the conversation. It really isn't even a recommendation. It's a starting place for discussion. It's something that the Super Asset Act has asked us to do. I think it was probably a case where, oh, let's make sure we're multimodal and make sure we have a transit component in there. I'm sure it was something like that, although I wasn't part of that discussion. The other thing, with my benefit of having another area to represent, we had another project in the city of Newport that came in quite a lot higher, 40% more in the scoping estimate from what the city of Newport had proposed for their project. So what we did was, we lowered the amount of money that we actually provided. We suggested that we stick with the amount of money that the city of Newport originally had asked for, not the scoping amount, which, because it would have been like $4 million. And instead just funded PE and right-of-way for that project as a recommendation. So at least they would get started on it, they could get their shelf-ready design, and then look for other funding. So that is also a possibility to fund a phase of something. So just know that that is also some availability.
So what I think the question is what's the, we give said direction for the meeting next week, and what we're comfortable with, and I think what I'm hearing from you, Sid, is that you have questions about the Veneta project, and whether or not you're thinking that if you go in and advocate for Springfield, that somehow or another Veneta has to take a hit because there'll be too much arguing. I mean, I know it's Super Acme. I'm actually going to sit in on it. So I guess what I want to be clear about what you're willing to advocate for.
Ellen, can I?
Yep.
Okay. So Franny, you brought something up I think is critical, and that I think that's what we can find out from Rick, is if they're willing to go with the original number of, what is it, 780,000, because now I think this, with the higher amount, the scoping, Bill, what you mentioned, frankly, this may call in the project, is project readiness. I don't know. Is it absolutely, will it absolutely be ready? Those are some questions I think that have to be vetted out by the city of Veneta. But if they're willing to accept the number that's 44% lower than what the new scoping number says, the original number, then advocating for the Springfield project, I mean, that was already in. That was already in.
In addition.
Yeah, that was already, but even at the last Super Act meeting, the 150%, that was in. That was moving forward with the original Veneta number. And now with the higher scoping, all of a sudden that gets left off. And so that's where I think we need to clarify with Veneta if they're willing to accept the original scoping number as getting the project started and then having to come back at a later date. I don't know what else to do here. Funds are limited.
So Sid, what I would say is that I think that changes the way you can talk about this. You just did it very well. That you were worried about Veneta feeling it's being taken away from them, but in fact, in the course of the conversation, it ends up it's taken away from Springfield. And so can we get it back to where both are in play? And that just makes good sense to me. I don't think we should be begging the other question if we can not be begging it. I mean, I don't think, yeah.
So with that, we got, so the direction would be priority as is with clarification to comfort level about Veneta, and then proposing this alternative funding strategy to get the Springfield project in play. Anybody have any objection to that strategy moving forward?
I'm going to look at Paul because he's going to be staffing up there, so I'm looking at you too.
I am fine with the strategy and the additional comments that have been offered today. Again, the act did have that concern at the meeting about, gee, you know, this increased ask on the City of Anita project is basically meaning that the Springfield project got bumped. There was even a suggestion by one ACT member a couple of weeks ago to bump the Florence project down, because now we've got two very large asks up there, and it's bumped the Springfield one out. That did not get support at the ACT, but that discussion happened. So same perspective.
Claire, there's Mike for you.
No,
said?
that's
Okay, good. And let's move on to the next fund. CMAC, Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Funding. Last we had this, we submitted letters from each jurisdiction plus a signed letter by all members of MPC asking the OTC to reconsider the funding allocation, current funding allocation based on our eligibility that's actually retroactive back to 2013. And our letters were sent in after the initial staff letter came out, and then the Mayor Lundberg and Sid and Paul and Brenda were at the meeting, so.
I didn't. Three of us.
Oh, you didn't go, okay, the three of you, Brenda, Paul, and, you want to start off, Brenda?
Yes, after listening to the comments that the MPC provided on this subject at two different meetings, we drafted a letter on behalf of the MPC, and then obtained individual letters from each jurisdiction within the MPO area and presented those to the OTC. Mayor Lundberg did an excellent job of expressing what the issues were to the OTC, and made sure that she stressed that there were really two issues that we were bringing forth. The first was the fact that ODOT had indicated that there would be a conversation or some sort of process in the future to talk about how the funding would be allocated in the future. And we made clear, along with the other CMAQ jurisdictions, that we all wanted to be involved in a productive conversation on how those funds would be allocated in the future. But Mayor Lundberg made a point that there is still the outstanding issue of the fact that FHWA has determined that both Springfield Eugene and Salem Kaiser have been eligible for CMAQ funding at least back to 2013, and we need to be made whole for those lost amounts, which in our case amount to, under current funding structure, about $10 million in lost funding. And so what I heard the OTC chair, Chair Bainey, state was that she understood that those were two separate issues and needed to be handled separately.
And at the end of the meeting, the chair actually asks ODOT staff to work on this issue.
Yes, that there needed to be a conversation about the second issue.
Right. Mary, do you want to add to that?
Well, what I'll just say is where I think we need to be, because I don't think this is going to go anywhere unless we push it. Okay. So, understanding when you say offline, and I'll look at Franny and Bill here, but you know, there's not a great desire. I understand it's a difficult discussion. Mike Quilty is a counselor from Medford, and he and I get along fine, and he was there testifying also, and we saw the letter, and he said, it's nothing personal. I said, it's nothing personal with me either, Mike, but he says it's gonna get heated, and I said, it is, and that's okay. So I think there's an understanding that this needs to get remedied. But who has to actually help us remedy it? Because we can talk about it or send letters all day long, it's not gonna get fixed. So I'm looking for the MPC to, agree that we need to work on it, make some phone calls, have conversations. Congressman DeFazio's been made aware of it, and to bring him on board about talking with whomever, that somehow or another, there is a way to fix this, you know, and one solution that's been brought up is just take 2018's planned out for all these other areas that have had the funding, is that maybe you look at that next year and just make us whole at that point, or over the, you know, a series of a little bit of time. But the new committee that they want to have would start after the 2018 funding cycle. So you would go to there, and then you would have, and the proposal from ODOT staff kind of is, well, maybe we do a little bit of the funding allocation like we have, and then part of it's competitive, or suddenly we make it all competitive and everybody has to compete for the dollars, something that would redistribute the funding so everybody participates. But if there was a moment in time where, because FHW already saying, you know, you need to, we've been eligible, and ODOT sent the letter that says don't plan anything past this point, that there is an opening, a window of time, that I think it's plausible to say, we want to be made whole, let's talk about that and take care of that, and then we're all on the same page going forward after that. And it was proposed by a state legislator that we just whack it right off the top, that 2018 timeframe, just make us whole. And that would be Salem Kaiser and us, and they've been very supportive. They were supportive of me going down there because they couldn't, their staff person came down, but talking with Kathy Clark, the chair of the MPO, and Mayor of Kaiser, she was fine with me saying whatever that would help emphasize the fact that we should be made whole. So I think there's an agreement with Salem Kaiser and myself about doing that. The agreement I need is from this group, and then help with making, you know, working on that issue to just get it resolved. There's a resolution in there, we just have to decide that we want to do it first, and then how to go about doing it.
Yeah, alternatively, they could fund the plan as funded and take money from other buckets to make us whole as well. That would get us.
Yeah, that got a laugh from the legislator I was talking to. Because they're busy going around the state right now hearing the $3 quadrillion they need for transportation in the future. So it was not their first choice. Their first choice was take it out of that next pot that would be available after 2018.
Yeah, but just ignoring us isn't the right approach.
Yeah.
Paul, you had something to add?
So I'll reiterate a little bit and then add some new things. Yes, at the OTC meeting, the ODOT staff first presented the ODOT proposal for a process, and it was entirely focused on, okay, how do we change this starting in 2019 to include Salem and Eugene? It was entirely focused on that. And it wasn't even really, I mean, I didn't even state that correctly. It wasn't how do we change it to include Salem and Eugene. It was how do we include the statewide use of CMAQ funds, and by the way, then Eugene and Salem will be part of that. It could be, they showed a spectrum of possibilities on the screen, could be that ODOT keeps all the money and decides where to spend it on CMAQ activities. That has pretty much everybody nervous. Portland Metro's very against that idea. But again, the staff proposal in Klamath Falls was just to do this future thing, as has been said, and it was very encouraging at the end that OTC Chair Bainey said to ODOT staff, you know, there's two things you need to do. One is this future change, and the other is dealing with Salem and Eugene's funding need now. So, as has been said, we think we need to press that advantage, press that opening, work on how to not let ODOT off the hook, if you will, for that direction. Also, a week from tomorrow, on Friday, September 9th, is the quarterly policy group, Director Matt Garrett's policy group meeting. And both Mayor Lundberg and I are members of that policy group and will be attending. The last agenda item that afternoon is CMAQ process for all of 10 minutes. We don't know how much he will speak to the second process that the OTC chair directed. But frankly, Brenda and Mayor Lundberg and I have met since Klamath Falls, and if that doesn't come up next Friday, I think we're prepared to say, what about that second thing you're supposed to do? if all that is mentioned next Friday in Director Garrett's, report on the CMAQ process is, so we're going to change it and form a committee, we'll say, well, what about that second thing? And there are some bullet points that I put together in this handout, just sort of continuing the contacts, continuing the phone calls, continuing the communication, continuing to work with Salem Kaiser. The third bullet on there, considering working with all CMAQ parties to find a solution to float all boats. I have that on there because that is where Portland Metro is coming from. Portland Metro is concerned about two things. Number one, having their funding reduced because of the inclusion of Salem and Eugene. Number two, actually three things, having ODOT control the funds and decide where to spend them and not suballocating them as has been the case for a couple of decades. And then number three, Metro is facing a lot of other air quality issues right now, which you've probably read about, air toxics from some specific industries. And it's interesting to me that when the MPO managers, I've talked with them a couple times this week, when they're framing this issue around CMAQ, they're saying that they want to go to the legislature in the 2017 session and ask for funding to address air quality across the state, not just CMAQ, but they're couching it more as we've got this public awareness about our air toxics, about heavy metals, about these industries. We need funding to do that. We don't have enough from CMAQ as is, so let's join together and ask for more money from the state to address air quality altogether. I think that's a hard ask, honestly. I mean, there's limited money in the state, period, and to ask for that sort of specific thing, and I think it's fine that they have their priorities, but really their air toxic issues, if you've been following them, are not transportation related. So we have to be very careful about muddying this CMAQ issue and our funding with their issue. But that third bullet is sort of where they're coming from. And then those last couple of points on here are how could they make us whole? And there's any number of ways. They could, as Mayor Lundberg said, use other funds in other ODOT areas to just give us one-time payments, us being Salem and Eugene. They could direct all future CMAQ funds to us for a couple of years, spread it out, and a larger share over several years. I mean, so they could say 19 and 20, Salem and Eugene get all of it, because frankly it would take pretty much all the funding for 2 years to make both of us whole. Or they could say, okay, over the next 5 or 6 years, you'll get a larger share, but not all of it. And then, again, that last one is part of what Portland's asking about, is go to the legislature and say, hey, we've got a problem that's retroactive, we've got needs in the future, air quality is everybody's concern. Federal CMAQ money is not enough to deal with it, shouldn't the state be putting money in? I think Portland is thinking about specifically recommending, it's not a lot of money, but they're specifically recommending why doesn't the state match the CMAQ 1-for-1? So we get 17, 18 million a year in federal CMAQ money. Could the legislature pony up another 17 or 18 million a year? It's not a big ask, but still. Mayor Piercy?
Oh, I think this is good, and I think getting that, especially the first ones, out of the way where you have some strong support from your legislators and others, I think would put a little pressure on the situation. I think we need to head out the door with that right away.
Did we get any feedback from local delegation other than Congressman DeFazio?
On CMAQ, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I had a conversation with Representative Nathanson about this issue. She only had one response because she was running to a meeting. All she said to me is, I am outraged.
Any other legislatures respond?
Yeah, I spoke to Representative Lively and Senator Beyer, and it was Senator Beyer who suggested just, taking out the 19 funding and just make us whole.
I spoke to Representative Holvey also.
What did he say?
I pointed out the fact that he was very instrumental in helping with air quality issues in our area, especially around field burning, and that we saw this as a necessary thing, and it was there was a lack of fairness on part of the distribution of the money.
I would just suggest or for you to consider, is I think this is one of those times when I think we should try to get all our legislators going in the same direction at the same time, and as a body, and it really has to do with the we have been shortchanged, and they're our team, and they should be out there in front together, using all of their positions to make us whole. So that kind of ask to me is more than separately asking legislators. It's trying to get them all to sign on to something together and get them moving together on this. And then when we're asked what our priorities are, this should be one of those priorities. That's, for us, that's a sizable chunk of change. So yeah.
A joint letter signed by all the legislators, similar to our letter from MPC.
So I spoke to Chair Boehne before Mayor Lundberg and Paul and Brenda went down. In fact, I communicated to Brenda and I communicated to Christine as well. And she's clearly open to trying to bring groups together. She did say it's going to be a challenge with the commissioners. So I think talking to the legislature is probably going to be our best bet. We know Commissioner Lohman is actually from Southern Oregon, so he's not going to budge. And I have spoken to my counterparts in Washington County and Clackamas County, and they gave me two numbers each, I-205 and 217, and that was it. And I said, I understand. So they are going to continue to put pressure on their legislators to keep the money where it is. And I believe they've already met with Senator Devlin, and carries a pretty big stick in the state capitol. So I think talking to our local delegation is with Representative Nathanson now, in a sense, being Senator Devlin's counterpart.
Right.
I really think that that's a great spot to start, as well as Senator Byer, who chairs the Senate Transportation Committee. I think that those two maybe can do a tremendous amount of heavy lifting for us. Because I think the OTC right now, I think it's going to be really tough to get, Tammy said it's going to be tough to get the OTC to come up with a positive solution, at least right now. The future, yes, we can go down that road, but right now to try to make us whole, it's going to be a challenge. And I think based on where these commissioners are located, it's going to be tough. I was surprised that Susan
don't have
Moore.
one.
No, we don't. Our closest one is Susan, and I was actually kind of surprised that she's even kind of dug her heels in a little bit too. And I'm going to meet with her again, Commissioner Morgan, and just to see where, come on, Susan, do me a favor, would you? So, we'll see.
Well, I agree that, we aren't in the days where we have someone that's just, located in the community that's on the commission, so that they're a huge advocate for us. And reading faces when we were testifying really said a lot that they weren't on the same page as we were. And having Rogue Valley there testifying was not good. But I also chair the OMPOC too, and that's meetings coming up too. So I'm going with the, it's not personal, it's going to get heated, but we can come to a good solution. I like the idea of, getting our legislators together and collectively making that statement. And we do have two that are in key positions, so they have the opportunity to put some pressure on. It's too important, too much money can do too much good for us to say we can't give it. We have to give it the best effort we can to figure it out. And I think there's a solution in there. I think there's a way to get there where everyone can be okay with the outcome. That I just have to believe that, or else washing bugs off my grill, going to Klamath Falls and other things is just plain not worth it. So, how to come to a good resolution. And I'll keep going as long as I know that everyone, we're on the same page about it, and we believe that we should be made whole and that we can find a solution.
So keep the pressure up by engaging Congressman DeFazio, asking him to weigh in. Joint letter from all of our legislative delegation, especially with Representative Nathanson and Senator Byer weighing in, and then keep the pressure up on communications with OTC and the meeting that you were talking about.
We need to make a pitch to Kate too.
Yes.
To the governor.
Yeah.
And probably
Through Carmen
the,
Flore.
the member of the House who represents the Salem, Marion County area too. Wouldn't hurt, along with DeFazio.
I was gonna say, let's not forget Marion County as well, and in
Yeah.
fact, I'll reach out to Commissioner Cameron, who's the former House Republican leader in the House, now he's a commissioner in Marion County. I can reach out to him and ask him to do the same thing.
You're writing this down, Brenda?
I am.
Can you send it back out to us as a?
I absolutely will.
All right. Anybody have an objection to that strategy to move forward? Anybody want to add to it, Brenda?
Yes, I'd like to ask for one more piece of clarifying direction, is that there are, I think it would be beneficial when we reach out to all of these parties to give them some sort of indication about what the fix is, what you would like the fix to be. And so we've listed 4 bullet points on this page that show what some possible fixes are, and was wondering whether or not you had any thoughts about how you wanted this fixed. And I'm talking about the make whole provision. So use other funds, which we've heard from Senator Beyer is going to be a very heavy and difficult lift. Future CMAQ funds, taking it off the top, which was actually a suggestion from one of our legislators, over a 2-year period, because as Paul said, it would take up most of those funds, because it's not just us that will be asking to be made whole, it'll be Salem Kaiser as well. Direct a larger share in the future over several periods, or and then the 4th bullet, basically the Portland metro area ask in asking for additional funding, but I also agree with Paul that's highly unlikely.
Yeah, I guess my preference would be bullet 3, which is, I mean, it'd be tough to just cut off everybody in 19 and 20 and say, please support this proposal. But if we had a larger share that made us whole over time, I think that's could be somewhere we could get with other folks. Mayor?
I'm actually hesitant for us at this juncture to pick one. I think it's to me, it's more like, here are things that we have under discussion, and to hear from them too about what they think is the most feasible thing to do. And the other piece for me is for it to be written or in a letter or any other where we are, where, and I think Mayor Lundberg's done a good job of expressing it, but it needs to be in our writing too. We're not interested in anybody losing. We understand people have important projects. We all have our what we try to do for our communities, and we understand that. So we want them to get what they want, but we want to get what's fair for us. And I think we have to put those things on try to make this not an I win, you lose kind of thing, but that we want both of those things. So we're looking for a way to do that and do it fairly. And we're asking everybody to join us in that effort.
Right, but thumbing your nose at fairness and saying, sorry, doesn't work.
Well, that's why I think you don't want to push them down the road of which they're at right now, which is they see our gain as their loss. So what you want to come back with is we don't want you to lose. We just want to be made whole here. So let's figure it out together.
Although it is zero sum, there's only a certain amount of money.
Yeah.
I don't know, because I always tell you this, but it's what actually Glenn, our legal guy, told me a long time ago. Don't ask if, ask how. And so the question is, that's the question is, how do we think we can get to that end where the others' needs are met and we get made whole? So you're not asking someone to choose, you're asking, how can we figure this thing out together?
And, you know, I agree with Mayor Piercy on that. She and I both sat in the legislature, and now more than ever, you don't really want to get adversarial with the Portland metro area delegation. They're together, they're powerful, and they, a lot of times, Mayor, I don't think it was that way as much when you were there, when you were the majority, when you were the D leader. And it was less so when I was there, when we had a split House and Senate. But I think today, the delegation from the metro area, you just don't want to twist their tail. even though we should, and even though I'd love to, I don't think,
Not very productive.
I don't think I don't think it's a wise thing. So settling on a single bullet point probably isn't the best.
Not at this time.
Well, how about I rephrase that a different way? Are there any of these bullet points in which you don't agree with? Because I think that when we go to our legislative delegation and they say, yes, I agree with this, what would you like us to ask for? We need to have some sort of response or provide them with some direction. I would imagine they will ask us to draft this letter that they're all going to sign as well. And so we'd like to have some idea about which of these bullet points are you not in favor
I
of?
think number 4 is such a long shot that it'd be difficult to support that.
Yeah, I think you're gonna have to drop number 4 because it just muddies the issue, and we need to be clear if anything. 3, I do have some concerns about. I think that's about crafting, right? Because, when you talk about a higher future share, right? We'd like to get whole sometime before I retire, right? So being able to kind of give it some context about how long over a reasonable period of time, and then I think I would be in favor of,
Being more specific?
well,
3 to 4 periods?
yeah, 5 periods, right? Something where we can have funds available to actually do something. If it's 1% more money, we won't be able to actually do anything with it. But I think there may be a hybrid version in between 2 and 3 that's also available. Maybe do full year in 19, and then stagger down from there. At least that way, one way to consider making us whole is to get part of it in a bigger chunk, so that we can strategize and utilize and program it more appropriately.
Mayor Piercy?
I'd take out 2. I just think that's such a hair on fire when the way it's currently written.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. And it's not likely at all. Paul? One of the ways that you can craft that 3rd bullet, let's say it's pay us back, make us whole with a larger share over 4 or 5 years, and address we don't want anybody to be hurt, is to say, look, give us a larger share for 4 or 5 years, because other CMAQ entities, you got our share for 4 or 5 years. You got your money from these years advanced through getting our share here. You're not losing any money. You just got yours earlier. You got a bonus.
I think you could, this is wordsmithing, but I think you
Yes.
could say something like, we know you understand that you got that money.
Already.
Already. We know you understand that, and so.
We're willing to forego the interest.
Right.
One of the arguments that they have made all along for not removing their funding now, one of the arguments they've made, is that funding has already been programmed for those projects. They cannot say that for the future because that funding has not been programmed yet. So we would actually be using the very argument that they're using to keep their funding now to say, okay, well, when the funding is no longer programmed, that's when it should be available. And so what I hear the group saying is that you're definitely all on board with being made whole, that bullet number 4, we think that muddies the water, but we have some ideas about how being made whole might occur, and here are some of the options that we have come up with that might be acceptable, and we'll word it in a very diplomatic kind of way. Because I think it is important to when we go to the governor and the legislators and Mr. DeFazio, and I think we should go to the Senator Wyden and Merkley as well and say, here's what the issue is, and here's what we'd like you to do. We have to have something that we want to ask.
Good idea to add.
Yeah.
So maybe, and, I suggest that it be a starting point, because it's still that, these are, you want to hear maybe what we wanted, but it certainly isn't all-encompassing.
Right.
We want to, hear, it's like many discussions, throw something out there because people will react, and then it starts the dialogue that may not start otherwise. So if we can couch it that way, probably an easier pill to swallow.
Mayor Pearson?
And I'll go back to this one more time, that I think when you start the conversation by telling them that you're not seeing this as an oppositional thing, that they understand the issue, you end the conversation with, we're all at the same understanding and nobody's a bad guy, but here we, just kind of
Nothing personal.
Nothing, even more than that, you know, when you write a letter to somebody and you want them to know that you know something, so you say, you know this, Rick? I mean.
As you well know.
They also know they are a bad guy. Just at the risk of stating the obvious. All right, anybody object to that as a path to move forward? You clear enough, Brenda?
I am, thank you, Chair.
All right,
Yes, thank you.
good. Move on to the next topic. 6D, Joint Committee, Legislative Joint Committee and Transportation Letter. We drafted it and then had some discussion of it last time and added a couple of things to the letter. In particular, number 12, prioritize seismic preparedness, and number 4, passenger rail as an economic development aspect of it. And then, Paul, you wanted to discuss one more thing, and then I'll entertain a motion for approval of the letter.
Yes, again, thank you, Councilor Zelenka. You saw the first draft of this last month, and as was just mentioned, we incorporated the comments that we received with some additional sentences on number 4 on the draft letter around passenger rail being a vital part of economic development and moving forward with the growth of our economy. We added point 12, prioritizing seismic preparedness. That was not in the previous draft. And then the third thing is in the last paragraph where we talk about established funding sources need to be increased, be bold. There is now a specific mention of an increase of at least 10 cents. Now that may not be enough because when the Joint Committee was here and the people attending the luncheon were asked how much would they support, I heard everything from 10 cents to 30 cents. So you may want to see a larger number in this. You may want to see at least 15 cents or something. Or you may want it stated that representatives from our area, when you joined us for lunch, indicated that they would support anywhere from 10 cents to 30 cents. So we would like to see at least a 10-cent increase immediately. We could word it that way. But we added in a little more specificity in that paragraph. So we're asking for direction again on the final language, perhaps on that paragraph more than anything. Any other input, and then I can edit it and have it signed and sent. Proposal is to add, we've heard 10 to 30, but we think it should be at least 10. Good, and then Mayor Lambert.
So Paul, I think this is correct, and maybe you know this better than I do, but it's my understanding that AAA and the Oregon Truckers Association are willing to go to 13.
Wow.
That's what I've been told. That is my understanding. So that's a good starting point. So that means 13 cents. Anything 13 cents or below is not going to be referred. It's a good starting point. Might be able to move them a little. So I'm just going to throw that out there that's maybe where the discussion begins. And that's what I've been told, and I don't know if you've heard anything different.
No, correct, Commissioner Like and I have heard that same thing. Basically, I'm hearing it because as LCOG's representative, being a member of the Oregon Transportation Forum, that's putting together a funding package proposal, the OTA and AAA and other non-public sector entities have quite a bit of sway over how far the funding can be pushed. And so I have heard that 13 cents a gallon for the gas tax and then other things on registration fees, et cetera. I've heard that same number. The Transportation Forum is having its next meeting a week from today and is supposed to have a final draft of the funding proposal discussed next week. So we'll know more then, but I would be perfectly comfortable with 13 cents being the minimum.
And I'm just going to ask is 13, or do you want to be more bold? I'm suggesting we maybe should be a little more bold. And that would be my suggestion. And at least that's our starting point. And then, all groups are going to be coming together and our legislators will make that decision.
And what are you thinking about what's bold?
I'm thinking, well, 30 is probably a little bit high, but I would say 20. I think if we go to at least 20, I know Jay talked 25, which I was, wow, Jay. Jay and Rob Zickel, well, we're in.
His was over a period of time.
His was over a period of time, but I see no reason why we can't talk somewhere between 13 and 20. 20 cents, I don't think that's that outlandish, and, legislature will tell us no. It'll be up to them, but I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but that's my thought.
Well, they're, having gone to the whole day's worth of activities, and having, for some reason, spoken to the legislators several times since then, they seem to be in some point in the state. And mostly the feedback I've gotten that I've taken note of is that there's, you know, a bazillion projects, there's a bazillion needs, and that there's a recognition that the small communities have no way to fund things. And the bigger communities have mechanisms to fund things. So it's, they're just mental notes that I've made. And when they were here, a specific question we got asked is how much we thought the gas tax should be raised. And I'm looking at this legislative session, so although we can throw everything in the kitchen sink into this letter, you know, I know you're at the point of just signing it, but you know, I'm looking at it going, boy, that's a bunch of stuff in there. I know that they're Medford, that it's a lot of stuff, that making it as brief as possible, push that ask for the gas tax in the front, because we are talking about this legislative session. And what would be the one thing that they could do that would do the most good? It would be have some funding to do all of the things that are on that list. So I would advocate, I think OTF's last time they had a proposal was 16 cents or something, and it pretty much covered a lot of categories. I still like the idea of the 1 cent for orphan highways, because it is a place, I think, where they can get support from the rural areas, because they have a lot of orphan highways. And if you had 1 cent, just 1 cent of an increase that goes to that, you know, and not that Main Street would come up, but Main Street is that, you know, there's a way for local jurisdictions to see the pathway to taking over a jurisdictional transfer. So having something that's more specific around that,
Yes.
and 16 cents may, you know, I know that that's where it was before, that was a comfort zone level of at least that much. I would, you know, I would be fine. I like those sort of, it looks like you thought it out really well. 20 looks like you're just taking a stab.
20.3.
Yeah, 20.3, there you go.
Gary and then Paul.
Yeah, having bargained a time or two in my life, I know that if they say they're willing to go 13, the subtext is, please don't ask for 20. And if I went to John and said that my local needs a 10% raise, John's not going to come back and say, well, we're willing to go 13. So I think it's more likely to, not that you're cheap, you know, you're a wise businessman. I think it's more likely to ask for something more than to ask for something and hope for moderate than to ask for moderate and settle for less.
So that means asking, not putting a 13, but saying somewhere in the ballpark of 20 cents, as
Yeah.
opposed to
But you don't want to be
a low.
20, make it a 19.
19.8. 19.9.
And even if you say
19.9 sounds better.
even if you say you set the mark, but you say over a reasonable period of time. So maybe you're asking for 20, but it's in fives, or it's in a 10, a 5, and a 5, or, you know.
Yeah.
A 3-year contract is what we're looking for.
Paul? The Oregon Transportation.
I heard, apparently.
The Oregon Transportation Forum proposal does start out with a smaller increase and does eventually by 2020 or 2021 get up to, among other funding sources, a level that would include a 10 or a 13%. Again, we'll see it next week, but last time it was 10 cents, now I think it's 13 cents. But it is over time. And part of what I heard last month was asking for that significant increase up front. That this body last month was really saying, no, let's go for it now. Let's start with a increase, because the need's now, it's not in 2021, and keep it indexed from now. So I understand adding it incrementally, but I also think that, you know, saying 16 cents now and incrementing the gas tax to inflation, which we've never done in this state, much less nationally. So we could say 16 cents now and increment it to inflation. We could also add to point number 6 to Mayor Lundberg's discussion around the jurisdictional transfers or orphan highways. To number 6, we could add a simple sentence that says, we request a 1 cent increase in the gas tax dedicated to facilitating jurisdictional transfers.
I just want to concur with what I think I heard Christine say, and that is that I think your ask may come at the end, but it should come at the beginning too. I mean, they don't need to fish for what your ultimate request is.
Gary?
Yeah, I guess I got too much background in that area of the highways and whatnot. And I gotta admit that the highway systems need a lot of help. And they have deferred and deferred and deferred and deferred. And it's not so much different than what Eugene did. But Eugene made some decisions, and it's worked out really, really well. They've made some big investments, and the return on the investment is over 100%. We desperately, in the state of Oregon, need to get the larger amount up front. They've got major problems. You really probably don't want to know about them. But they need a lot of funding. And they've got, you know, I'm talking about their structures specifically. You know, roads filling potholes is one thing, but you've got some major structures too. And so I'm kind of what you were thinking, Paul. I'm thinking 15, 20 cents with the idea of them indexing or doing something that continues that to grow, because for the last 20 years, we have been negligent. And we have. And so we need to move now. And we can't wait for another session. It's desperate. It is very desperate.
So is there an objection to a proposal of 15 to 20% indexed as the language? Any objection? Hearing none, sold.
Can I ask again about the 1 cent on the 0.6?
Anybody object to that? Or the other anybody object to that? No. We also had the passenger rail one. Everybody okay with that one? And then also, we added 12. Anybody have a problem with the seismic preparedness? All right. So, is that clear enough, Paul?
It is. Thank you.
All right. Move on to follow-ups. ODOT update.
So I have a couple things today. I have some good news. We had some earmark money, federal earmark money, that was held over for years and years. We call it the DeFazio earmark. Those were the days when we used to have earmarks on federal transportation funds. And I was asked in the last few weeks about, do you need that money, or should we just bring it back and apply it to another project? So there was 1.2 million that was left over for Coburg. And so we worked with the city of Coburg to see about match, and the county were unable to come up with match. So then I asked my boss, and he said, yeah, we could do the match. I was amazed. So the region put in $200,000 so that we could match a $1.2 million earmark to save for the Coburg interchange. And so what I'm hoping that money will do, and we'll see what will happen once we get estimates from engineers, but what I'd like to see done is have what we call the DAP level design, which was basically footprint for all the ramps for the full interchange. We've done the improvements to the west. We need to do the improvements on the east. And then do a shelf-ready design for the bridge itself. And then if we have to spend that money, have it obligated by 2019. And if we have that money obligated by 19, we'd have a shelf-ready bridge and a good layout for an interchange. We'd be in a really good position to get that interchange funded, at least the bridge funded, and then the interchange beyond that. So I'm excited about that. And then there was $86,000 left over from, for Cottage Grove from another project that didn't get completed. And what we decided to do is take that money and put it to the leverage money that we had already set aside for some sidewalk and safety improvements in Cottage Grove on sidewalks. So that's good, those two buckets of money will be held. That's good news. The other thing is September 15th is another tour of the Joint Legislative Committee on Transportation Funding. They're going to be in Newport at the Embarcadero. And what they're going to focus on are coastal issues. So they have already sent out invitations to all the ACTS members that are on the coast, from Astoria all the way down to Coos Bay or Brandon. Anyway, so all the way down this other part of the coast. And so we have Florence and Dune City ACT members that have been invited. Well, what it'll look like is they're going to do a tour from 1 to 3 with the Legislative Committee and their staff, similar to what we did in Lane County. And they're going to be looking at coastal bridges and talking about seismic resiliency, tsunami resiliency, bridges. And then they're going to have a roundtable from 3:15 to 4:45, where each ACT will have about 5 minutes to talk about their ACT issues around the coast. So we'll have Lane ACT representatives and Cascade West ACT representatives to talk for about 5 minutes, and then they'll talk in general about the coastal issues at that time. So I wanted to know that was happening, that was coming up. And the third very important thing is there's aviation money. So months and months ago, we were asked for a representative from our ACT to sit on an aviation subcommittee to talk about funding. Apparently, last legislative session, they set aside some fuel. They did an aviation fuel gas tax, and they're taking that money, and they have a pot of $1.5 million to provide grants to airports. And so they're starting their first grant cycle for that, and they want some ACT and we want MPC input on what those grants are going to be, since we have the City of Eugene's airport represented out of this MPC. But I'm just mentioning it now. We have the Cresswell City airport manager on our ACT, who also is on this aviation committee. They're looking to have grants about $150,000. They would be used for leverage for FAA grants. Also small improvements to instrumentation, runway, things like that for the airports. Not a lot of money. But the ACTS and the MPC will be weighing in on whatever the proposals that come forward. The application process starts in this month, later in this month, and goes through November. We're going to be putting together our process of how we're going to weigh in and talk about these proposals as they come in and how we might. We're not going to be asked to prioritize them, because that will be the job of the committee. We will be asked to give input to the proposals. Yeah, we like this a lot because it's these things, and maybe get a letter of support kind of thing. So I'll have more news about that in the future. And if we want to have somebody from the aviation group to come and talk to the MPC about that, we can do that as well. I'll hold that as an agenda. And those are the 3 items I was planning to bring.
All right. We already talked about STIP on highway.
I just want to interject here now. Obviously, we owe you, the city of Coburg owes you a great debt of gratitude for all your work, for taking up our cause, and just want to say thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah. Maybe someday I'll get built. We already talked about STIP non-highway enhance. Anything to add to that? No? Anything to add to legislative update? We talked quite a bit about legislature.
The only thing I might mention there, I've already mentioned that the OTF is meeting next week, the Oregon Transportation Forum. There also apparently is some indication that the governor herself is trying to formulate a package and a proposal. So we're trying to decide whether this is, I mean, it's great that there's support, but how many different competing packages could lead to splintering things. So we haven't found out much about that yet, but I'm going to try and find out more next week.
Good. Yeah, give us more.
she's involved in an election or something.
She might be in an election campaign. Springfield Main Street safety update.
Well, I mentioned already that the speed limit went into effect and getting good feedback. The speed limits are lower in Maine, and although we're on break now, I've looked at the future agenda items, and we're going to be talking about the arts grant and also the Maine McVeigh corridor study. So it's we're moving ahead on all of our safety issues.
The speed limit went from.
It went down 5 miles an hour. So wherever, because it was 45 and 40 and 30, so it went down 5 miles per hour per area.
I might add, if I may, that staff from ODOT, the City of Springfield, and Lane Transit are meeting to discuss the corridor study. We'll be looking at both this arts median concept as well as the access management issues associated with the new light rail proposal through here. ODOT's providing money for the study. We see this as a prototype to help us figure out how to implement Senate Bill 408 from a few years ago that requires ODOT to look at access management a little more thoroughly at the planning level than we have in the past.
Good point. Real update.
Good idea.
Nothing, I think I told you that there is some money proposed in the budget, and so we're just hoping everything stays on track. I don't think there's anything.
Literally and figuratively.
Okay. OMPOC update.
We're having a meeting October 7th.
Yes. So October 7th in Bend is the next OMPOC meeting. It's going to focus almost entirely on what can OMPOC collectively advocate for in the 17 transportation package. The MPO managers and ODOT staff are meeting in 2 weeks to finalize the agenda and some of the materials, but it will include the OTF proposal that's supposed to be coming out at the meeting next week that I referred to. Plus, I also sent around to the MPO managers, all of the other MPO managers, this legislative committee letter in a different format. I use those bullet points as sort of our priorities for things to move forward in the session and what were there. So we're putting together a collective list for OMBOC to look at. There's things that we know are going to come off the list that not all 8 MPOs are going to collectively support. Unfortunately, climate change, for instance, is one that probably will not get support from all 8 MPOs. So we'll see how that goes, but that's going to be the focus of the OMPOC meeting, is what can we collectively support.
Lane Act update.
So we're meeting next Wednesday, September 14th. We have a full agenda. We're starting member presentations for the different jurisdictions, and the first to talk about issues, transportation needs, projects, opportunities, and so Lane County will be up first. We have a rural transit update from our Jamie Dempster, who's our ODOT transit person. We'll talk about the Joint Legislative Committee on Transportation Preservation and Modernization letter. Apparently not all jurisdictions are on board with the gas tax increase, so we have to talk about that at the act and see how we can get consensus around supporting a gas tax increase. And we're also talking about our Lane Act work plan. And next month, in October, we're going to have a joint ACT and Oregon Freight Advisory Committee meeting. So for the first time, we're going to hear how the Freight Advisory Committee works, how they operate, how they select and prioritize those projects for Connect Oregon. So I think that'll be a very informative discussion, and we look forward to that in October. So we're going to talk about that this month to get ready for that. So that's all.
All right. Anything anybody wants to add to the agenda? Meeting? Hearing none?
I would like, actually, I just want to note, I mean, this is looking forward a little bit into the future, but Friday, November 18th is a date you may want to block out on your calendar if you're available. Making sure that's the right date. Yes, it is. Friday, November 18th, the Oregon Transportation Commission will hold its meeting here in Eugene.
November 8th.
November 18th.
That's during the day, and then they usually do public comment in the evening.
Do we have the location?
I don't yet.
Okay.
Right. Thanks for that, Paul. With that, next meeting, October 6th at Springfield City Hall Library Meeting Room. With that, we're adjourned.
Thank you.